Welcome back to Big Sky Big Takes. This is a co-production of the Big Sky Podcast Network in conjunction with the FCS Fans Nation Network. I am your host for this one, Colby Peterson. On the show today, guys, got a familiar face. If you listened to us last week, Montana Parlay joining us again. Montana Parlay, how you doing, man?
I'm hanging in there. Busy week for me, but I can always jump on and talk FCS football.
Yeah, I should say, like, from the Montana Mint, you know what I mean? I feel like I need to be shouting out the podcasts here. So, yeah. But also from the Big Sky Podcast Network, we have from the R&R Catcast, we've got Thorny, Ryan Thornbury. Ryan Thorny, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic, and appreciating the opportunity to be the two out of three Bobcat fans on this podcast. So yeah, it's good to be Bobcat oriented here tonight.
Yeah, we got a cat panel over here, guys. And
the reason the Grizz didn't want to show up today.
I don't know why.
I don't blame them.
We'll be gentle, probably. Maybe.
Yeah, but so like we said, members of the Big Sky Podcast Network, check out some of the great productions that are going on over there. The Tubs at the Club guys covering Idaho, of course, R&R Catcast covering Montana State Bobcats. Grizz Fan Pod, I think we've had Brent on this season one time, but go check out the Grizz Fan Pod. I think their pod was 3 hours this week, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Therapeutic session, I imagine.
Yeah, I can't blame them. 3 hours, it's getting it all out. Then, of course, we've got Kyler Neal. I'm sure you guys, if you're a fan of the FCS Fans Nation, you know Kyler Neal super well. He does Eagles Power Hour, among with many other things, including the FCS Fans Nation Weekly podcast with Matthew Frazee and Jamie Williams. But then let's see. Of course, Weber State Weekly. If you want to find out about the Wildcats, we're glad to find out. I mean, we do football, of course. If you're interested in football, that's what the FCS Fans Nation is mostly about. But if you're interested in volleyball, we're talking volleyball. So that's out there. But also want to shout out the NAU Sports Podcast. Casey's covering NAU down there. National champions in track, if that's a thing that interests you. That's a thing. They're out there. So I think that's everybody, right? I think I got them all. Did I miss anybody?
I think so. And the Bobcats are actually ranked in the top 25 in track this year for the first time that I can ever remember that ever happening in my fandom. So shout out to the Bobcat track team while we're here.
But let's talk a little bit of football, guys. So obviously, we're going to keep our normal format. We're going to talk about three of what we feel is the most impactful games of Week 7 in the Big Sky. And so those will be Idaho at Montana. Obviously, we got to talk about that game because a shock, I think, to a lot of folks. Idaho fans elated, Grizz fans a little sad. But then we'll also talk about Montana State going down to Greeley to take on Northern Colorado and kind of what we learned there. And then we'll wrap up with Sacramento State going up to Eastern Washington to face the Eagles on the red turf. And then we'll name our offensive and defensive MVPs, guys. So let's dive in. Let's talk about Idaho, Montana. So going into this one, I mean, this isn't a show where we necessarily pick, but I think most people, if you would talk to them going into this, they're saying, yeah, it's the Grizz, at Wash Grizz. Idaho's an up-and-coming team. And Idaho walks out with the Little Brown Stein. If you didn't know, this is a rivalry game. So the Little Brown Stein is the trophy, and the Vandals take it home for the first time since 1999. Is that right, guys?
I think that's correct.
Yeah. So I don't know, guys. Give me your impressions on this. We can dive a little bit more into the stats and stuff, but just first shot. What were you thinking, Thorny? I want to go with you first, man.
I mean, in my gut before this game happened, I was thinking, you know what, the Grizz are going to rebound. They're probably going to just steamroll Idaho at home. Idaho's had like a good story so far. Jason Eck has done a really tremendous job with that program in a short amount of time. But I thought, they couldn't waltz into Missoula and take down the Grizz. But if there's anything that Idaho has done under Petrino was play well in games where they were punching up. And they punched up tremendously in this game, and I was very surprised the way that the game went down, the way that Idaho controlled the game and was able to kind of neutralize pretty much everything that Montana does in order to steamroll opponents. So I was just really impressed. Just a gut reaction. I was really impressed that it happened, and ultimately the score wasn't quite as close as it really was, as the Grizz scored late. But Idaho really dominated this game, especially in the second half. So big kudos to Idaho.
Yeah, like you said, time of possession, a really big thing here.
The
Vandals dominate 42 minutes of the 60. Grizz only having 17 minutes, 52 seconds of possession. So big factor. And Idaho liked to just kind of grind it out and chew up that clock, and it worked for them. Parlay, what about you, man? Initial reactions on Idaho at Montana?
Well, as a Cat fan, it's hard not to be happy about it. But
sure.
I think what got me is spread open at 8.5, and it seemed like great value on the Grizz. Like Thorny said, you just expected them to bounce back between the kind of the weird showing at Idaho State and then the bye week, and Idaho not being really proven. Like close games against FBS, what do those really mean? It's hard to know. You can kind of build a story on it, show that your team's pretty good, or by the end of the year, oftentimes it means nothing. So I really thought the Grizz would come out and win by 2 scores. When it moved to 16.5, I thought there was some value on Idaho, just seeing, okay, they're both off a bye. Idaho is going to be playing their Super Bowl this weekend. I'll take the 16.5. I did not put a nickel on the money line on Idaho. So I was not expecting them to win at all. I thought they might cover in an ugly game. It was an ugly game in that first half. I missed the second half, but judging by the stats and by everyone's reaction and just following along on Twitter when I could, it sounds like Idaho just dominated them in the second half. And that's got to be that's probably why the Grizz Fan Pod had a 3-hour plus pod is, it's one thing to come out rusty in that first half. And, the quarterback McCoy was just making some crazy plays. Twice I saw Idaho catch a punt and a kick return and start field possession inside the 5. They lost it in the sun. They had a bad return. Yeah. And you think the Grizz defense should just destroy them.
Shut them down, right?
But Idaho got out of it twice. The quarterback, he was dead to rights on a couple plays in that first half where he scrambled through it. Receiver catches it on one leg before he goes out of bounds. It seemed just like it was all the luck was going Idaho's way. And I was like, the Grizz are going to right the ship and win this game in the second half. I think I said that online to the Grizz Fan Pod, and they thought I was trolling them. But I was,
I can see how they'd get there.
I was being sincere, but no, and I don't know if it's a lack of adjustment by Montana, if it's Idaho is actually a premier team now in the Big Sky, or if Johnson just isn't that good. If it could be one of those things, it could be a mix of all of them. I don't know what you think, Colby.
Yeah, so obviously I think it's probably a mix of some of those things. This is Johnson's first real test, and that's unfair because it's but he played at San Diego State last year, Colby. It's not like he hasn't seen pressure in his life. It's that's true. That's 100% true. He hasn't seen pressure in this system, though. Now, you think about the schedule that the Grizz have had to this point. People have noted that it's been fairly soft, and like you said, there were some stumbles in Pocatello against Idaho State, who is, I think, the worst team in the conference. You can argue that Cal Poly is now because Idaho State beat Cal Poly last weekend. I think Cal Poly has some redeeming qualities right now, but I look at Idaho State and I go, what are you? What are you good at? I don't know. So the Grizz stumbling a little bit in Pocatello was maybe a little bit of a harbinger. So I can understand how you'd feel going into this one that Idaho's a much better defense than probably any that they've faced thus far in terms of just getting pressure on the quarterback, but then also doing a good job of containing. And that proved true that defense from the Vandals maybe is a little bit underrated right now, because I don't think people are necessarily talking about it in the way that they should. Especially, we know that the Grizz don't have the most whiz-bang offense. Hey, Weber State guy, right? Neither do we. That's why this year has been really weird to put up almost 40 points in every game. It's wow, we don't do this. And so I think that I could see how you would get there and say, yeah, I would want Idaho. If it's 16, I could put some money on Idaho to cover, But as we get into the game, like you said, that second half, the Vandals only trail in one quarter. It's the first quarter. After that, they lead every single quarter after, including some really big plays, including just absolutely, like you said, a lot of luck, parlay, but then also just some good performances. Absolutely clutch performance by Giovanni McCoy, who I think is making a case for some national awards right now. He had 286 yards in this game against a very stiff Grizz defense. So talk to me a little bit about how you guys felt about that Idaho offense, because it feels like this is the key. They put up just enough points on a stiff Grizz defense to get the dub, even though, like you said, Thorny, there's that late touchdown. It wasn't as close as it would appear because they were up pretty much 2 scores.
I thought I was watching Eric Berry out there with Gianni McCoy, just a guy who was just hanging in the pocket and just slinging it downfield with confidence and putting it where his guys can make catches. Like, not necessarily the running part of the game that EB3 had, but I felt he had those kind of intangibles where he just wasn't getting rattled, and every time he just put the ball in the air, you just had a good feeling he was gonna, make the play. And his receivers really helped him out on that too. And it's just, he was a cool cucumber back there, didn't get rattled, and just made plays. And that's how Idaho ended up winning this game, is they just made more plays than the Grizz, and when it mattered.
Yeah, I mean, if you've watched the Grizz at all this season, you know that the Grizz like to bring pressure. That's a really key piece to what they do. They like to bring 7. They like to just blitz often. And so for Giovanni McCoy, a freshman quarterback who I think is making a case for the Jerry Rice Award, to handle that, my goodness, like you said, Thorny, cool as a cucumber.
And handle, like last year, EB3, to make that analogy, he handled it well at Eastern on the red turf in that night game in the regular season against the Grizz. Here you
Thriller. What a game.
Great game. Here you had a rookie handling it on the road at Wagriz. He impressed the hell out of me. And like that kind of was the difference, is the Grizz, they've got the system offense and they didn't execute like they need to. 2 interceptions, you can't have that. Whereas you had McCoy and Hatton just throwing up, you can call it luck, but really they're talented. They made plays when they had to. And when you've got playmakers and they're constantly working with each other, I think that's a lot of what the Grizz fans kind of want to see sometimes with some of their talented players, is just make plays with your playmakers. Sometimes you have to break out of that systemic approach, especially when you're getting bogged down like they were against Idaho's defense. So, I'm sure if it came to the playoffs and the spread was 8.5 again to open up, I'd probably bet on Montana. But right now, Idaho really looked good. And I don't know what you guys think, because we're in the same situation that Montana just was in, where, Sac, Weber, Montana State have not really played anyone in the Big Sky. Weber and Montana State face each other. We'll get into that later, but that was the thing, is like, we don't really know how good these top ranked teams are because of who they've played.
Yeah, totally fair. One thing I was going to ask you guys was talking a little bit about this was, like you said, a game between 2 quarterbacks just slinging it, right? There was not a lot of run offense to be had in this one. I think everyone expected that from the Grizz defense. That's what we expect. But how do you guys take that Idaho run defense? Because, man, they absolutely shut it down. I mean, they gave up just what? Let me pull it up real fast. They gave up total net 34 yards of rushing on the ground. That's it.
I mean, that's skewed a little bit by, they have a negative 19 by Rohrbach, their punter, on there. And then, of course, Sacs County here, which is will forever boggle my mind. But
minus 11.
They only had, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13 attempts by their running backs in this game. That just seems not a recipe for success. But, you're not going to get many yards rushing the ball if you just don't hand it off to your running backs. I mean, the Grizz didn't even have the ball for 20 minutes, so you're not going to really get it going. I think the Grizz have a problem on the offensive line in this game, and Idaho really exploited that the Grizz offensive line maybe isn't as good as people were thinking, and their running game isn't as good as people were thinking too. I think Idaho is exceptional on defense. They have some big guys, and I think they're probably above average in that category, but I think it really has to worry Grizz fans how they were unable to run the ball at all in this game.
Yeah. And I look at the Grizz and I say, there are some Big Sky is a very loaded conference when it comes to the running back position. I mean, you guys know this. You've got, I think, one of the best running backs in the country in Isaiah Fonse, who we haven't been able to see this season. But if you watched the Bobcats last season, you got to see him. And man, is he physical. Of course, we've talked about Alonzo Gilliam last week. We're going to talk about Cameron Scatabo here in just a bit. It's a really, really good conference for running backs. I look at the Grizz and I say, who's your guy? Who is that standout running back for you guys? And I can't pick him out.
No. It's supposed to be Marcus Knight, but 4 carries, 13 yards.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
Last thing I was going to talk about here, guys, before we move on, unless you had more, was talk about efficiency. So we talked about Giovanni McCoy and how he's cool as a cucumber, and that's true. Went to the conference stats. Right now, Giovanni McCoy leads the conference in passing efficiency. And number 2 behind him is your own Tommy Millott. So I kind of wanted to ask you guys this question. Is it just a function of the offenses that these guys are playing with? Is it like a new school versus old school kind of a thing where these new young quarterbacks coming in, playing for new young coaches? Do you think that that's kind of a trend that we might see in the Big Sky Conference where there's going to be more passing efficiency in the conference because of the youth that's coming in the coaching staffs?
I don't know if it's the coaching or the system or just the fact that I don't know. He's a mobile quarterback. He showed that, and he had 6 incompletions. So I don't know how much of it is just when Grizz are bringing the pressure. They're not going to have double coverage, triple coverage. So if he can break away from that pressure and make a decent throw, it's going to be, I don't know what I'm saying here, but he played a hell of a game. I don't know the other games, does that include FBS games, his efficiency rating?
Yeah, because I think that there is an opportunity in the conference stats where you can say, I want conference only stats. Okay. I believe this is the whole body of work, the whole season. So that's 6 games for the Vandals, 5 for Montana State.
Okay. Well, when when the opponent's expecting you to run, having an efficient quarterback is huge. And that was kind of how Tommy made his run last year. Was everyone was expecting the Cats to run the ball, and he made some big plays.
Yep.
And it could be the same thing here with McCoy. He breaks out of the pocket, and he's got Hatton. Hatton could be his.
And Hatton was big.
Hatton could be his McCutcheon this year. He breaks down the sideline, makes big on those toss-up throws. He's making them. He's out jumping, out powering the DBs and making those plays.
Thorny, any final thoughts here before we move on to you all's game, Montana State at Northern Colorado?
I guess the last thing I want to say on this is, where do the Grizz go from here? Were they exposed? Is this just they got caught by a better team and had a bad day in the office? That's really my question moving forward. Is how do the Grizz rebound? Because they have a bad schedule ahead, and I don't know how worried Grizz fans should be right now. But surprising outcome. Kudos to Idaho again, and entertaining game to watch as a Bobcat fan.
Yeah, you're right, Thorny. There's a big challenge for the Grizz this weekend. They have to go to Sacramento to face the Hornets on the road, and so this is kind of I don't know. Now the Grizz are going to get into the meat of their schedule. So losing to Idaho, I wonder if it's going to be like what happened to Weber last season, where they lose to JMU. And then it just felt like just this cascading, just close loss after close loss, where it's just like they just couldn't seem to figure it out once they got to the meat of the schedule. And then by then it was too late. They couldn't make the playoffs. I think the Grizz will still make the playoffs, but I just wonder if this will have an effect on the tougher part of their schedule, which is coming up, because they'll face Sac State this weekend. They will face us the following weekend in Ogden. And then I think that there's one more tough week. There's one more tough. They have to face you guys at the end of the season, always, right?
Always.
And that game is on the road for them. That game is in Bozeman. So
their next 3 games, their 3 big games left are all road games.
Yeah. So
and it's a schedule. I mean, if we trip up against Weber, we get a bye, 2 easy wins, and then Cat Grizz at the end. Where
Cat Grizz.
Montana doesn't get a break here in 3 consecutive weeks.
No, Idaho was the game that they were supposed to win to head into that tough part of the schedule.
Yeah. So I just wonder if there's a hangover effect because of that.
Maybe.
But I guess we'll find out. I'm really excited to see how the Montana run defense handles Cameron Scatabo, and we'll talk about that in the third game. But let's talk about you guys' game. Montana State heads down to Greeley, Northern Colorado. It's not grass anymore, guys. It's turf now.
It's turf. I actually liked it when it was grass.
Yeah. And so, guys, this one started out, I think, interestingly, right? So things kind of kick off, and the Bears are, what do you call them? The Battling Bears? That's what you call them, right, Thorny?
That's what we accidentally called them, yeah, Battling Bears, but apparently that's Rocky.
Yeah, I've been
Is that
listening to the
Rocky?
show.
Yeah, Rocky
Parlay?
and Billings,
Yeah, it's
NAIA.
It's an NAI school in Montana, but
Yeah.
it sounds good.
I do like it. The Battling Bears, they were hanging around a little bit on you guys. In fact, they were leading after the first quarter. You guys take the lead going into halftime by 3 points. But talk to me about that, kind of your thoughts on that first half, because it looked like, whoa. Like, what's going on? Like, Northern Colorado is not this good. Like, what is happening? Give me your guys' thoughts.
Well, our safety play continues to be a big problem, so that was a very easy touchdown for Liza Dotchin when our safety came over. Kendrick Bailey took a terrible angle and ran right by him.
Rough to watch.
So it was very bad to watch, and that's something that's kind of haunted the Cats all year, and especially in the first quarter. We come out and we just aren't able to contain offenses. We don't have a good game plan. We don't wake up right away. I don't know if we're just coming out and trying to figure out what the offense is going to do, and then before we figure it out, they've scored a touchdown. I don't really know, but that was a pretty easy touchdown for the Bears. And the Cats came down and moved the ball really easily in the beginning as well, but got backed up and had to kick a field goal. And then the next touchdown for the Bears was pretty questionable in two ways. There was a roughing the passer and targeting call on Brody Grebe on a long third down that would have ended the drive due to the targeting and the roughing the passer call. Bears got another chance, and they were able to score a touchdown. I think it was also on third down, but replay showed he was bobbling the ball when he landed out of bounds, but they didn't even review it.
So no
Easy touchdown
possession,
for the Bears, 14-3. Even at that point, though, I was like, all right, well, this can't continue. Like, the
That's
Cats
annoying,
will
but
get it going. I never really felt worried about it. I'm like, this is just ugly to watch. But the Cats will come back, if not in the first half, in the second half. But when we took that lead with under 2 minutes left in the first half, you pretty much knew at that point, the game's probably over at that point. I know it was only 17-14, and I might be cocky to think that, but just the fact that the Cats closed out so strong and really started clamping down on defense and figuring things out on offense, and they come out and score two pretty quick touchdowns in the third quarter. 9 minutes left to go in the third quarter. It's 30-14, and then the Cats, as they have been doing, go into super ultra conservative mode and just hand the ball up the middle for 2 yards a pop until the game's over. It's pretty. I don't enjoy the Cat running out the clock offense, but they went into that, and that was the end of the game.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, Thorny, like you said, because yes, the Bears do go up 14-3, but then, like you said, it feels like there's a shift in the game. The Bobcats kind of figure things out. UNC really doesn't do anything from that point on, because they score that second touchdown with 12 and a half minutes left in the second quarter. And keep in mind, like, that's the last time that they see the end zone. Like, they don't score again, And so it's like, yeah. And like you said, there's some questionable call there. Okay, was it a touchdown? Whatever. But then the Bobcats just kind of get rolling. They just get it going, and the game really isn't in doubt from that point. Willie Patterson comes. It's a huge game for him. Tons of yardage, some big plays. Nice to see him kind of getting an opportunity against this Northern Colorado defense, because he's a talented player. And so it's like we talked about last week, you guys aren't throwing the ball a lot. So good to see those wide receivers still got hands that work.
Yes.
Been running the ball so much.
Your hands get tired blocking people all day, so it's good to see that they can unflex them from the grabbing jersey position and catch a football.
Yeah, it works. Parlay, I'm going to give you a chance, man. Thoughts on this one? Just kind of that first half and kind of how you were feeling going into the second.
Yeah, the first half was frustrating, and I think similar to Thorny, I never was fearful that the Bobcats were actually going to lose the game, but I, as someone who bet on the Bobcats at minus 20.5, it was pretty nerve-wracking for that first half, especially down 14-3 with those penalties going against us, and not just with betting, but the future of the Bobcats team. those two big offensive line injuries. The one guy got rolled up on, and I hear he's out for the season. It's just injury after injury. And next man up, yes, but it comes a time where, how can we keep up with this, especially on the O-line? So that was tough to see. And then, of course, the horrible, but they had 2 touchdowns, just the horrible angle and tackling on the first touchdown, and then a penalty and a really confusing non-challenge. Like the challenge, the announcers were kind of speaking for me in that game when it's like, okay, you had another one where it was like an 8-yard pivotal gain. Instead of being 3rd and long, it was 3rd and short. And it was such an obvious drop, and they never reviewed it. And so there's a couple of those. Cats look sloppy, but Willie came through. There was the turning point. Probably I don't win that bet, and hot take Nate doesn't win his. As he says, scared money, don't make money. And he was really confident in -20.5, a little more than I was. But Willie Patterson had 1 catch in the first half. Tommy threw it up, and the DB made a great play on it. Willie ripped it out of the dude's arms.
Like he's all
in the end zone.
And touchdown. Yep.
The guy still kind of had it. It went to the ground. They were wrestling with that ball for a good 30 seconds before it was called a touchdown. But I mean, if that's an interception,
big.
Who knows how that? I mean, I think the Cats still win. Cats were controlling that game, especially you saw what happened in the second half. But if he doesn't make that catch, I don't come away a winner. Nate doesn't come away a winner. Actually, it took a touchdown by Sean Chambers with 1 minute and 20 seconds left to cover the spread. But yeah, frustrating first half. Happy Willie made some great plays. Saw Tommy started to shake some rust off, but really mostly concerned about the injuries. That's the most troubling part. That's what worries me the most about the future and about playing you guys next week.
Yeah, so I want to ask you guys about that because Tommy he just returned from injury, ended up going out in the Eastern game, really tough, hit his head on the turf. It was just it's a bad deal. And then you guys had the bye week. And so he had some time to kind of get things back together. But I wanted to ask you how you guys felt about his performance because he was 15 of 19, 3 touchdowns. He ended up walking away with 217 yards. Seemed like a pretty good performance back from what was maybe potentially a concussion and a bye week. How are you guys feeling?
Just a quick correction there. There was no bye week for the Cats. That's after.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Because you guys played Idaho State. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you can call Idaho State.
It's an Idaho State thing. Yeah, man.
It's a scrimmage. He started off a little rusty. I think I saw a comment pop up here. He had to shake the rust off for sure. He started like 2 of 5, sailed a ball on the sideline that looked pretty bad throw. But once he kind of got his feet back under him and was able to make some throws and get some things going, a couple nice little runs that kind of look like the Tommy Lott that we're kind of used to seeing. Nothing big yet, still, but the little elusiveness in up the middle and a little spin move to get himself like an 11-yard gain at one point. So, I was pretty impressed for his first time back. They really let him take a majority of the snaps and the passes. Chambers only threw 3 passes in this game. And, I could spend a whole podcast talking about how the Cats are approaching the quarterback situation with Tommy Lott and Sean Chambers. I'm not going to, but, Tommy Lott looked good coming back. And, yeah, he is number 2 in the efficiency in the Big Sky Conference right now, and that's something he's going to have to do and continue to do throughout the rest of the season for the Cats to be able to make a playoff push here, or a Big Sky Conference title push even at the end of the season.
Yeah, the nice thing is that for you guys, there's the game against the Wildcats this weekend. That game is at home for you, so that's good. And then the rest of the schedule is pretty soft until Cat Grizz, which is also in your building. So I think odds are in your favor that things look good. There's still a potential conference championship on the line. But do you guys feel that there was some maybe like, oh, Sean Chambers is so good, no, Tommy's coming back? Do you feel like that's kind of like settled down a little bit now that Tommy's been able to come out, passes really well, took care of the ball? You guys feel like that's not really a thing in Bozeman anymore?
We haven't played anyone. So, and I'm not in Bozeman, so I'm going to talk to my friend who's got season tickets there, see what his feel for it is. But we're going to know a lot more about that after this weekend's game. And because my feeling is Chambers was playing better overall, but again, it was against Idaho State. It was against UC Davis after Murderers Row in a night game. So I don't know. I mean, it's really tough. I'm glad I'm not the one making the decision. And like Thorny says, we could talk about it for for almost half a Grizz fan pod as who should be quarterback for Montana State going forward.
Only half though.
Yeah, I was joking with my brother. I was like, damn, I wish Chambers was a senior so they could just say, you know what? We'll give you most of the snaps for your last year. And, but I was looking up, he's a junior. So it's like, it's what, I don't know. Vegan can hopefully figure it out. I mean, Sac State kind of knows what to do with it. So, but the problem is they're so similar in a way. I think Chambers got a little more meat on him, and it seems, man, he kind of makes some throws that I don't know if Tommy makes, and might even run better, and does run better than him. So it's
better. Yeah.
But Tommy's from Butte, and he had a hell of a, I mean, how do you have that guy lose his job because of injury? He hasn't messed up yet. So, man, Saturday's going to be interesting to see how he handles the QB situation and how they play against an actually legit defense.
The only thing I'll say real quick on this is it was really refreshing, the UC Davis game, to see a Bobcat quarterback take every snap, not get subbed out for some sort of weird Wildcat package, and sling the ball over the field, be in command of the offense, and be in complete control of everything, and make plays with his feet and his arm. It looked the most normal it has in a long time in Montana State. So it was hard knowing that that's the last time I see a normal-looking game from a Bobcat quarterback, because it's going to go back to the subbing thing like Sac State's doing. But there really is no wrong choice, I guess, is what it really boils down to. I think they both have pros, they both have cons. They seem happy enough with the situation. The locker room seems happy. Everyone kind of knows their roles, so I don't think it's going to backfire in any way. But it was really fun to watch the normal quarterback slinging around, and it was hard to know that was going to end.
Last question on this, guys. I wanted to get your thoughts on, so Dylan McCaffrey actually outpasses Tommy Mellott, not nearly as efficient. He's 33 of 49. He gets 259 yards. Like we said, Tommy, 217 yards on 19 attempts. It's far, far better. But what did you make of McCaffrey being able to move the ball relatively? I mean, is that a concern, or is it just like, that was what they had to do, and so they did it?
He's only capable of dink and dunks. I mean, that he doesn't have much else in his in his bag. He can throw the ball a long ways, but he can't. It just doesn't. I mean, all Northern Colorado does is just little out routes, little hooks for like 7 yards, and just do it over and over and over again. And I knew that once the Cats were up by 2 scores, it was over, because that's literally all Northern Colorado can do. They're just going to keep doing that. So it's like they don't have big play capability. He's a good looking kid. He can make some throws every once in a while. Every once in a while, you're like, all right, well, that's why he was a 5-star quarterback. Then he makes a couple decisions and throws. I'm like, all right, well, that's why he's at Northern Colorado.
Yeah. How about you, Parlay? How you feeling about that defense?
Well, not great, just mostly because of like the edge tackling and a few big plays throughout the season. But when it comes to the yards, it doesn't bother me. They give up some yards, but when the field gets smaller, getting closer to the red zone, the Bobcats can dial up some different packages. They can bring some pressure. Like the comment just said, bend not break. And we saw it last year too against Weber. We saw it against Eastern in those two big games where Vegan really came out and impressed me. And, hopefully it just stays that way. Give McCaffrey 278 yards on 50 attempts. Who cares? They scored 0 points in the second half.
Yeah, they visited the red zone once. And like Thorny said, there's not really big play capability there. It's not really what they do offensively. So you went to the red zone one time. You came away with a touchdown. It's fine. Whatever. The defense handled that relatively. I mean, that's the way I feel about the Wildcats' performance against Davis, because Miles Hastings was very much that. He wanted to throw to the middle of the field, just kind of these short passes to keep moving the chains. But they also didn't have a lot of success in the red zone, or if they got there, it just wasn't happening for them. And so as a Wildcat fan in a similar situation, it's like, yeah, bend, don't break is fine so long as you don't break. Because if you do, then you got problems. So, guys, any final thoughts on Montana State battling Bears, or are we good?
I think we're good.
I'm good.
All right. Let's move on then. Let's talk a little bit about Sac State Eastern. This was an interesting game because I saw that a lot of people across the country felt like the Eagles were going to be competitive in this one, that they were going to give the Hornets a run for their money. Obviously, it's on the road. The thing is this, though, if you've watched Sac State in the Troy Taylor era, they are extremely good on the road. And so I always felt that Sac was definitely going to roll in this one. And that's exactly what we saw. 52 points. Just absolutely outclassed the Eagles. Give me your guys' thoughts on this one, because I think this is the best team that Sac has seen yet, if you don't count the FBS opponent in Colorado State, who continues to be absolutely terrible. Eastern, a quality opponent, but they handled it. No problem.
Partly, I don't mind if I jack this one because I'm going to have to take off. So I'm going to give this will be my last little segment here.
Sure.
I was kind of expecting this. Sac State is so good at running the ball. And after watching Eastern Washington's rush defense against the Bobcats, I'm like, there's absolutely no way that Eastern's going to slow down Sac State at all. And what did Sac State end up with? 385 rushing yards on 6.2 yards per carry. I mean, that was just more of the same. What the Bobcats did. Eastern's got big problems right now. I wonder if Aaron Best might end up being on the hot seat, because this is the worst Eastern Washington team I have seen in a long time. They've had a real bad schedule, but if they were a top 25 team, they would have won one or two of them at least. They won none of them, and the most competitive one was against the Bobcats. It's a good win for Sac State. I was wondering if Eastern could bounce back and protect the red turf on this one. I was a little bit cautious of that, and it was kind of a crazy first half when it was 21 points for Sac in the first quarter, then 21 straight points for Eastern Washington. I'm like, what's going to happen in this game? But then Sac locked it down, and that was that. So good win for Sac State. 36 first downs is a pretty ridiculous stat. looking at the stats there, Sac State scares me, man. They might not be the most complete team in the league, but they might still end up being the best team in the league in a lot of different ways. Just coaching number one. They might have the best coach in the league, Troy Taylor. Until he proves otherwise,
he's been really good.
Obviously there's the playoff games. Sac hasn't had a lot of success in the playoffs, but you can't argue what he's done in the Big Sky Conference.
Yeah, he's lost one Big Sky game. That's it. And that was to us.
All right, gentlemen. Well, it was fun being on.
Good seeing you, Thorny.
I will catch you later, and I will listen to the episode when it gets released.
Thanks, Thorny. Appreciate you, man.
Yep. Bye.
Check out R&R Catcast. That's where Thorny and his counterpart, Ryan, that's where they do all the breakdown of Montana State football. So go check those guys out if you're interested. I'm sure they'll have a breakdown coming up if you want to kind of get the Bobcat side of the Weber State matchup coming up this weekend. They'll have all the goods for you, man. So go check them out. But Parlay, I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about this Sac State EWU matchup because, like I said, we know that Eastern far and away has the worst run defense. It was the thing that if you listen to Weber State Weekly, we talked about going into our HOCO game, was that the Eagles were not going to be able to hold the Wildcat rush offense. It just wasn't going to happen. They give up it's going to be a lot more now. I was like, it was 288 yards, that week. Now let's see what they're giving up now. Now they're giving up 298 yards a game. Cameron Scatabo just destroys them. He has 201 yards net. He only loses 4 yards on 29 attempts. That's 6.9 yards per carry. Like Scatabo is just, man, he's just a monster. Then you add Asher O'Hara, which, if you don't know, Sac State is running this kind of like dual quarterback thing. And he had 149 yards himself right there. Or sorry, he had 94, my bad. He had 94 yards himself rushing. And so it's just like, that's 300 yards of rushing right there between two guys. How is Eastern going to deal with that? They didn't.
Yeah, they didn't. And I kind of thought this was Eastern's chance to say, hey, we're still good. It's just been our schedule. Yeah. We're coming home. we're gonna, at least make things interesting. They did in the second quarter. They had a rush where they scored 21 unanswered, I believe. But then, when you can't stop the run and you're playing a team with Scatabo and a quarterback who can run it, things aren't going to go your way unless you can get a lot of turnovers. They didn't, and they ended up, like you said, giving up 52 points. And Eastern was held once again, back-to-back weeks, held to 7 points in the second half. I mean, I know yours, the touchdown Weber gave up was a defensive one.
Garbage time.
But again, Eastern is not doing well in the second half. I think teams just know, all right, their defense sucks. They've got some talent on offense. We can adjust at halftime, and they're just the good teams in the Big Sky are just hammering Eastern in the second half. So, yeah, I don't know if Best is on the hot seat or not. I don't know how much his boosters and fans will look at the schedule and the fact that you lose, NFL or CFL level talent at wide receiver and QB. But when's the last time Eastern had a season where not only are they not going to make the playoffs, but they might not win more than 2 or 3 games?
Well, their schedule softens up here in just a bit, and so I think they'll get some dubs, but yeah, playoffs are off the table. This was an opportunity for them to get a quality win because that's what they need. They need a signature win to make a case to the committee that, hey, listen, the schedule's been tough, but we've got this signature win. The Wildcats were in a similar situation last year where they had lost to JMU, they had lost to Davis, they had lost to Montana State, and then they lose to Portland State at home, and that was it. That was the death knell for the Wildcats' hopes of going to the playoffs that year because where are the signature wins? They're not there. They beat Eastern when it felt like, well, that's what it is. You know what I mean? But losing to Portland State the following week was really like, no, Eastern is not going to be a good enough win to get you into the playoffs. And I worry that Eastern Washington this season is in a similar boat where it's just they don't have a signature win to go to the committee and say, hey, tough schedule, but this. There's nothing to show.
No. So, yeah, it looks like they can pick up maybe 3 wins the rest of the way. But, yeah, it's a rough schedule. Sac, but again, Sac looks great, but maybe Eastern's just not good. And the matchup was perfect for Sac with the way Sac's offense works versus the weaknesses on Eastern. So that's what makes, you're just an average fan. You're watching that score. You look at Idaho versus Montana. You think, man, Sac should just steamroll Montana late game at home. Bobby doesn't do well late games, but strength for strength. So it could be a completely different outcome. And I think the line is showing that too. It opened it, granted it's a Montana sports book. So it's always skewed a little bit towards Montana open because they can't afford to have too much money come in on the Montana teams. And, they have Sac only as a 3.5 point favorite. It's now 4.5. So I don't know. That just kind of shows what, the matchups can bring because, man, I kind of think Sac should win by double digits. I think a lot of people think that, but what do you think with Sac versus Montana coming up?
So if the line is, what'd you say, Sac by 3?
4.5 right now.
I would take that because it's like, listen, Sac's offense is probably the most prolific in the conference right now, which is normally a title that we would give to Eastern Washington, but they've had their troubles this year. They haven't run the ball quite as well as I think that they would want to. Gunnar Talkington is very talented. An Eastern Washington will always throw the ball well. That's what it is. But he's not Eric Berrier, so there's only so much that he can do. They've got some things that they've got to work on. I look at what Sac has done to every single team they've played. They've put up points, period. They've put up points on everybody. So if it's 3.5, 4.5, whatever you said, I'm taking Sac, man, because it's like, listen, the Troy Taylor thing, he's lost one Big Sky game in his time in the Big Sky Conference, and that was to Weber State. at home. Well, at home for them in Sacramento in 2019. That's it. I think I'd probably take Sac to cover.
I agree. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see Eastern, Weber, and Montana State play the better teams, because the Idaho Montana game, it just right now my feeling is that Weber and Sac are the two best teams, and then Montana State, and Idaho are all right there, like close to each other. And I think Montana was caught off guard by Idaho. They weren't prepared. They didn't play well. Not to take anything away from Idaho, but
No,
it
they were ready.
just seems to me like, Sac and Weber are a step ahead, and it'll be interesting to see this weekend.
Yeah, this is going to tell us a lot. I was thinking about this earlier today. So if you watched the Mariners make their playoff run for the first time in 21 years this last season, a lot of talk about chaos, right? Embrace the chaos. And I was thinking, what would chaos look like in the Big Sky? And so in my brain, this is what chaos looks like. The Grizz go to Sacramento and they win.
Yeah,
The Wildcats
possible.
go to the Bozeman and they win. But then the following week, the Grizz lose to Weber State. Fine. That's 2 quality wins for the Wildcats. But then Sacramento State comes to town. The Wildcats lose to Sacramento State at home in Ogden. Okay, so that's a problem. And then Cat Grizz is the last really big game. And if Montana goes and somehow wins the Cat Grizz game in Bozeman, that's just chaos, dude. It's like, this makes no sense.
And that's where you're going to have some ties at the top with teams that haven't played each other, because Idaho and Montana State don't play each other. Sac State and Montana State don't play each other. You guys don't play Idaho?
We don't play Idaho this year. We play them next year.
So we could have, like, hypothetically, we could have a 3 or 4-way tie at the top of teams that all haven't played each other. So there's your chaos, like you said, isn't it?
Chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that's very much like as a Wildcat fan, I'm not going to complain about sharing the conference title, because we've shared the conference title every year, except for the weird spring season where we won it outright, quote unquote. But it's like, what did we play? 6 games? We played 5 games because Cal Poly pulled out. We didn't get to play them. So it's like, is that real? Is that real? We won it outright? So you know what I mean? Like, as a Wildcat fan, I'm not going to complain at all about potentially sharing a conference title, because we've done it every year. It's fine. It's just the nature of the schedule. You don't play everybody every year. You play them twice every 3 years, and that's just the way it works. And so if the Montana State Bobcats don't face Sac State this season, well, that's what it is. It just happened to work out that way. The Wildcats have been a beneficiary of that, I think, in some years where, if they had played some of those tough teams, they might have lost, and they wouldn't have been conference champions. But it's the nature of the Big Sky. Really quickly, they got this question hanging out in here. I wanted to ask you partly what you thought. So this is from Nick. He said, yes, do you think the Big West schools, which are Cal Poly and Davis, they play in the Big West in every other sport but football, do you think they'll leave the Big Sky for the WAC? What are your thoughts there?
I'm not the expert on the whole realignment and everything. I can just only follow along with the chat. And I know a lot of guys that are more informed than I, they look at things like location, endowment size, admission size, academic factors, things like that. And those all kind of point towards, if teams are going to move up, those would be the 2 teams that do, Cal Poly and UC Davis, just because they'd be better off getting more scholarships, considering what their universities are more than anything else. So, but again, realignment is not my specialty. I love FCS. I love the Big Sky, and I'm not really looking to see who can move up and who can do this and do that. So I'm not the guy to ask, so to speak.
Well, I'll give a quick take on this. What I think happens is this. I think it is far more likely that Davis goes up to FBS than they go to the WAC. The WAC is WAC. And I don't think an academic school like UC Davis or an academic school like Cal Poly would go to the WAC. They look at those schools and go, what? no, we're not going to go there. And maybe that's like a very kind of almost like Pac-12-ish where they're like, no. We have academic standards around here. You know what I mean? But so I think that Davis is most likely to go up to FBS. Cal Poly's not doing very much right now. They are still working on it. And so with the state of their football program right now, I don't think they go anywhere. I mean, the Big West seems like a good fit for them. I can't see them leaving the Big Sky in football to go to the WAC because it's like, why? You're going to be more competitive by staying in the Big Sky Conference. Travel may be cheaper for the WAC, but it also may not be because they got this weird WAC ASUN thing going on. So you may end up traveling to Tennessee or something weird like that. You got to pay Austin P or something weird like that. So I don't know, man. I don't think Pauly leaves. If Davis leaves, it's to go FBS. That's my take. So, Parlay, let's wrap this up, man. Let's do offensive and defensive MVPs. Let's start offensive, man. Who's your offensive MVP in the Big Sky this week?
Well, you could give to Scatabo every time, and you wouldn't be
205
wrong.
yards. Yeah.
You would not be wrong. But, I don't know who the better team is at this point. It's probably Eastern. It should be Eastern. But, man, Willie, I'm going to do the homer pick again because it also helped my pocketbook. He helped me cover the spread. But anytime you can get 3 TDs and over 140 yards, that is really good. And again, I watched where he wrestled that ball out of the DB's hands in the end zone at the key point in the game when things were not looking good for the Bobcats. Again, if that, I think, I don't know what down it was. I think it might have been 3rd down. So if it was an incompletion, not a good thing for the Cats. If it's interception, they're still down big in that first half, and who knows what happens after that. But, just when he confidently took that ball out of the guy's hand and just stuck with it to the bitter end and finishes with 3 touchdowns. What is it? 148 yards off
on 7 catches.
On 7 catches. Yeah. I am perfectly fine with being a homer with that pick.
No, it's a good pick. And I can't blame you at all. That's an absolutely fantastic performance for a team that, like we said last week, does not throw the ball a lot. With Tommy coming back, throwing the ball very efficiently, found his guys. Willie Patterson was one of those. 7 of his 15 catches, 7 of his 15 successful receptions, but by Tommy Mellott, that's almost half just going to Willie because he was getting it done. And I think you go with the hot hand when it's hot. That's what happens, and that's what Tommy did. So I can't blame you. For me, offensive MVP this week is Giovanni McCoy. Here's why. He goes 21 of 27, also a very efficient day for him. 286 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. I did see that pick straight to Patrick O'Connell. It was just like, bam, right to him. Like he was just there. Like it wasn't any doubt where that was going. But overall, like we talked about in that first segment, Giovanni McCoy handled the pressure of the Grizz at Wash Grizz as a freshman in a massive game. Man, respect, because the last time the Wildcats played in Wash Grizz, it did not go well at all. Not go well at all. So kudos to him. That's a big game. That's some big time play. That's my offensive MVP this week. So now let's go defense. Who you got for defense?
Oh boy, that's why I needed Thorny here. Like I just, I can't even. I want to be smart ass to say Lucas Johnson for Idaho, but
2 picks.
Gosh, yeah. I got to find like an Idaho player here because the Idaho defense held Montana to how many rushing yards did they get again? Like for some reason,
it's a little skewed because there's a 19-yard loss because of the punter
losses,
that busted special teams play. 11 yards lost to Lucas Johnson, just sacks. So they gained 68, but they lose 34. So it's 34 net.
But whether it's the defense or the coaches on Idaho or a mix or the situation, but whatever got into Bobby and the Grizz's head that kept them to 4, 8, 11, 13 rushing attempts. For somehow they got the Grizz to play the game they wanted to play.
That's true.
So I don't know who to give it to on Idaho, but it's a team award. The Idaho defense, they come into Wagriz, they get the win, they hold them to 23 points with a last, a meaningless fourth quarter touchdown. So it was essentially 16 points when the game was put away. That's damn impressive. I wish I could give it to an individual, but they'd probably tell you, it was our whole defensive squad.
Yeah, I'd say, just kind of looking at it, probably maybe Paul Moala, because Paul Moala ends up with 6 total tackles. That's 3 solo, 3 assisted. 2 of those TFLs, one of them is a sack. He also has a pick returned for 19 yards. That's a pretty good day for a defensive player.
Sounds good.
So Paul Moala, there you go. That's gave Parlay a little bit of help there.
Thank you.
For me, man, I'm going to go on the other side of the ball. I actually like Patrick O'Connell for this, and here's why. 8 total tackles, 2 TFLs, half a sack, also had a pick at a really key point in the game, because I think that if he doesn't intercept that ball, Idaho's driving, and it's the first half. And so if they drive and they get a touchdown, it is full-on panic mode for the Grizz. But Patrick O'Connell comes up with that pick, returns it, stops Idaho from driving right there, kind of slows their offense down a little bit. That's a really big play. Obviously, it didn't, in the grand scheme of things, it didn't stop the Vandals from winning the game. But had that not happened and they had gone in and scored another touchdown, man, I think this game looks a lot different. I think the Idaho probably wins by a lot more. So Patrick O'Connell, even though your team lost, I think that you had a really good showing, and I think this week he's my defensive MVP.
Oh, we get to watch Patrick O'Connell versus Scatabo.
Yeah.
Prime time on ESPN2 Saturday night.
Great.
I'm excited.
Yeah, that's a big game. I absolutely love it. I love the deal that the conference is getting right now, where they're getting some of these games on ESPN. Like we said, the game last year, even though it was on really late, Montana at Eastern Washington, that was an instant classic, man. Like, I would go back and watch that game today because it was so good.
Yeah, Bobcat friends texting me about how awesome it was. I mean, how often do you get Bobcat fans watching their most hated team on their most disgusting field, at 10 p.m. at night? Like, it was such a good game. Came down to the end, and I know we talked about the line earlier. We talked about, oh, that's ridiculous. Sack will cover that easy. I have a feeling it's going to come down to that fourth quarter, if not the last 2 to 5 minutes.
You think it's close?
Yeah.
Okay. Because like I said, I think that the X factor here is whether or not the Grizz can hold Scatabo. If the Grizz run defense cannot hold Cameron Scatabo, just hand the conference championship to Sac State right now. Because if they can't stop him, nobody can. Not my Wildcats. Nobody. So we'll see.
They don't have to play us, so they might share the. If we can beat you guys this weekend, maybe they get a co-championship with the Bobcats.
Yeah. Well, all right, man. Anything else you want to shout out, Parlay? Anything interesting before we wrap up this one?
No, I mean, just man, if you think Sac State and Weber State are the 2 best teams in the Big Sky Conference, you can parlay their money lines and get more than 4-1 odds right now if you're in the state of Montana.
Wow, it's not bad. So little tidbit from Montana Parlay there, folks. We want to thank the Big Sky Podcast Network and FCS Fans Nation for allowing us to do this one. Really appreciate all you guys hanging out in the comments tonight. We tried to show as many of those on air as we can. What I need to do is I need to do what Blue does with Blue Bloods, where he reads them. That's what I should be doing. I should be reading those. So thanks to you guys for living in the comments. Really appreciate you. Thanks to everybody who helps us kind of put all this good content together. Check out the Big Sky Podcast Network. Check out FCS Fans Nation Network. They're doing a really great job highlighting the subdivision FCS. And so it's a good time. So I'll wrap it up like I usually do. Actually, wait, before I do that, I gotta get things ready here, man. So I'll wrap it up like I usually do. It's Big Sky, Big Takes. Woo!